Ms. Collins made a motion to draft, to hold the draft of the 5-year committee meet again, which is today. Considering the alternate budget draft for an overall increase of 4.5%, exempted expenses for Blue Ridge and the 5 position, new position. That's what we're today. And I'm thinking today that the FY 26 proposed budget has those changes in it. All right, you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, just give you the big highlights. What we tried to do on this is any changes that were made from the original budget that was proposed, we highlighted those cells in yellow, which ones changed, and in the notes we put in red which item, where the differences were. What was removed from this budget, or removed from the original budget, and is not present in this alternate budget. We did achieve the 4.5%. You'll see at the bottom that the budget is not going up more than 4.5%. The revenues, first 2 pages, everything stayed the same. You will note on the bottom of page 2, the prior year fund balance. In the past, we were using part of our prior year fund balance to balance our budget. With this budget, we're showing $393,000 added to our fund balance. Our revenues do exceed our expenditures. On page 3, on the salary and wages line, I want to point out one error in the note where we discussed the results adjustments from that's based on the FY24 wage study. I've got down $235,527. That number is right. That is what is included in the yellow highlighted cell. But I put that it was down $230,000. I pulled that from a different number. That number should actually be 408. It's actually down 408,000. We had roughly 664,000 in wage adjustments in the first budget that we presented, and now it's 235,527. So that number should actually be 408,797. So there's a change in that. So sorry about that. You may ask how we achieved that, get down to the 4.5% budget. We looked at when we could implement the wage study adjustments based on the study from the outside consultant, and we can reduce this by implementing the ECI first. So we had initially planned on going ahead and doing these adjustments, and then in the new year apply the ECI, the regular ECI adjustment, which is our base pay, our pay increase based on the employment cost index. But we did it through spreadsheets and worked on this to apply those wage study adjustments after the upcoming ECI, and we were able to reduce those significantly. Same thing on the part-time salary line. Very same issue. That number went from it's like 158,000 in the new budget down to 55,280 in salary adjustments there. Then on page 4, you'll see the local materials line. That amount went down. And there, we do have demand for increased downloadables, which there's not much allowance in here to be able to accomplish that without dropping some of the amount that we're spending on hard print, on other materials. If we're going to keep the funding level at what we need, what our experience rate is right now with downloadables. The other stuff you can tell is just, you can see the highlights on page 5, building repairs and maintenance, and the HVAC, furniture and fixtures line. Those items there, you can see what was in the budget originally and what's not in there. Then on page 6, a big change in there, we dropped a lot of the new items that we had on there, and then a big one was the main meeting room. These rooms here, we had 455,000 in technology adjustments in this room, replacements in this room, some additions, enhancements. That's down to just 105. We dropped it, and the 105 is basically the processing equipment. Think of it like your CPU, operates everything else. So that includes just that replacement at $105,000. Another thing I'll point out too is on consultant fees on page 7, the highlighted cell, 36,000. We initially had in there 30,000 for the feasibility study for the generators. Because we've been having issues with it, we want to still keep something in there for that. But we worked with another consultant, so who we think we can get that price down. We did get a price from one consultant, and that's where we got the initial 30,000. But we do have a consultant that we worked with in the past, and after looking back at what we paid him, we think we can get that number down. So we did drop it 10,000 down to 20,000 for that. And then on page 8 at the bottom, we initially had a facilities maintenance truck in there, and there was a premium associated for insurance for that, and we removed that, so I dropped that $700 because we had deleted the truck. Then on the last page, capital items, you can see in red the things that we deleted to get to the 4.5% increase, but one of those we felt like we could not delete is the server. We've got a server replacement on per our technology plan. We replace one of those pretty much every year, and we almost don't have a choice but to do that because it's what we use to operate and keep track of our digital information, so we really have no choice but to do that. So you can see the budget's increased 4.5%. And I will point out that of this increase, 53% of that is relative to the new branch. We've got salaries, but when you add the burden to that, plus the operating costs for the power, utilities, supply costs, programming, everything for that was roughly $600,000, $617, I believe it was. So 53% of that total increase is relative to Blue Ridge. And I think you also had in your packet the new items list. That was also one of the things that was presented. So you can see what's on there, or the items that remain after we cut the other stuff out. Any questions on that?
So we reduced it down to 4.5, and the other one was 11? What was it last? 13? Or so we moved from 13 to 4.5?
That's right.
Okay.
I noticed the contingency stayed the same. Is that 2%?
Yes, it's 2% of estimated revenues, and since our revenues really didn't change, that number stayed the same.
Any questions?
What's like the long-term plan for, like all these, I mean, it looks like y'all, if I'm looking at this correctly, there was a slight adjustment on the comp increase, slight downward adjustment, like 7, not slight, 700K. But y'all made up for keeping some of the comp increase through cutting a lot of their capital items. So like, what's the longer term plan for how to accomplish the maintenance items that have largely been stripped out?
What's the long,
Like the carpet, like all these maintenance items that have been stripped out of the budget to accommodate the request. Like, what's our plan? I mean, this is all stuff that's got to be done at some point, right?
Well, the carpet replacement, for example, we do that when the carpet needs to be replaced for our safety or wear and tear. But we budget as if there could be one that needs it, or we're keeping an eye on a particular location. But if we run into a situation, we'll have to come back to you for contingency funds. It's something that can't wait a whole year.
So are we saying that the carpet replacement, and I don't want to, like, the carpet was one example, right? There's quite a few technology
for us not to have this year, we'll ask again in the future.
What was the recommended increase for the ECI?
It's 4.5%.
Is the recommended? So can you walk me through the being down, the comp piece, when I think you said it was down 400, I think 400. Kind of flipping back and forth here.
Yeah, in the initial budget, this is from, we discussed this at the last meeting, Joe. The original budget we presented had 664,000, I think it was, in full-time salary adjustments and roughly 158,000 in part-time salaries. And that was based on an outside study that Fine Great People did. They came in and compared us to other peer libraries with similar service populations in 5 or 6 different states, basically eastern seaboard states from Virginia down, including Florida plus Georgia. And we also compared it to where the county was, because we could tell we had fallen behind because of our turnover rate, our salary, our vacancies. We were getting a lot fewer applications for jobs that we were posting and having to repost jobs. So that's when we went out for this study and had it done. And after we pulled the information from the outside wage consultant and also from what the county were able to get their pay scales for many positions, and kind of merged those two to see where we would need to be. And like I said last time, we didn't get to where the county is, but we were getting much closer. And so that's what those were done. That's why we wanted to go ahead and do them, the adjustments, as soon as we could, because that salary study was done at the beginning of '24. And we basically gone through 2 ECI increases, so, which the salaries are still getting adjusted, but you're, going to be a year and a half down the road before the second adjustment, the adjustment that was recommended gets made. And so it waters them down so much that, you're 2 years down the road. The whole reason we were doing this was trying to remain market competitive. And what we did was find what the starting minimum for all these various positions should be, and then based on our plan that our employees should be able to move from their minimum starting pay grade to their maximum of their pay range over a 30-year career. And then we just moved people along based on how long they've been here to make sure they were progressing along. And again, just refresh memory, those adjustments are applied to the ECI adjustments are applied to the midpoint of the pay range. So the people who haven't been here, they've just started, they're progressing a little further along to keep them moving along. If they're further past the midpoint, then it slows them down a little bit so they don't max out by the time their career's done. So that's where that came, the 664,000 in adjustments. And in order to get down to where we needed to be at 4.5%, we basically just went through and cut out basically the new items that we had on there. Plus, we looked at what we could do to soften the wage, because it was a big number. We pointed it out last time. It was glaring. It was a big number, but we felt like we were justifying why it needed to be, and then we looked at applying the ECI first and then making the adjustment, so we're able to drop it down to 235,000 for full-time. So that's how that all came about.
So that makes sense. I think when you, so the wage, I just want to make sure I heard you right. The wage study, I understand that was benchmarked against peer libraries. You guys also did some kind of comparison to the county, and you said we were behind the county in terms of comparable. I mean, I realize it's not apples for apples.
Yeah, we couldn't compare apples for apples in every job, but the ones we could, and actually got the job descriptions and job duties for certain positions that the county had, and compared them to the same job duties that we had for various different positions, mostly in support staff and librarians over there, but it's mostly other support staff. And then between the two of those, we tried to tweak, and I think actually actually, several of you have seen the wage study results. We've kind of gone over those. So that's how that came about. We got positions that we could from the county and then tried to get to where, because obviously it was a big number, so we knew we weren't going to get all the way there, but we're just trying to get it up a little bit closer.
Yeah, so what's the, I guess the other piece is like, what's the big hangup with our original proposed adjustments if we're like financially able to do this?
Great, glad you asked that question, Joe. Since our last meeting, I've had contact with at least 4 county council members. They are receiving emails from the public that they are instructed to slash the library budget. A 13% increase is not going to fly with county council, and they have to approve our budget. That's just the facts of the matter. It's not going to fly with them. They are in the mood to not give raises to county employees. That's just their mood right now. They are taking a fine-tooth comb to the entire county budget, and they're not looking to, I've had a conversation with 4 council members. I had a conversation with Ben Blunt on Saturday. They're not looking for a big increase. So that is from my perspective, the onus for getting this down to a more manageable, reasonable, defensible position that we can get county council's buy-in and that they will approve our budget without forcing us to do something we don't want to do, or without them coming in and saying, well, we're just going to slash your millage rate, we're just going to slash your budget, we're going to take matters into our own hands. So that's the onus for coming down from the 13 and to a more reasonable, manageable, I think, sellable budget to county council.
And I mean, I guess they kind of are taking things into their own hands already, it sounds like. What's the feedback you're getting on what they view as quote unquote acceptable? I mean, I realize we're kind of in a political moment where cutting for the sake of cutting is the culture du jour. So that is real, but what, is there any like basis for this, or is it just like, hey, we just need to make the budget smaller?
Well, I think because of the county council kicked this whole hornet's nest 2 years ago when they adopted the largest increase in taxes in Greenville County in 30 years. That was their doing, and they did it. And all those people who voted for a major tax increase lost. And all the new people coming in are saying, you ain't getting anything more. We're gonna repeal those taxes, we're gonna, reduce budgets, and that's their attitude. They're so fed up with just the continued increase in budgets and the increase in taxes, and that's what they're looking at. They ran on cutting taxes, they ran on cutting spending, and they're just not going to approve, major increases that they see are not justifiable.
Did I miss something? Are we asking for a tax increase?
We're not, but I've had conversations with these guys, and they know what we're looking. They see what we're looking for, and we're asking for. They see the numbers, and they cannot justify that large of an increase, even with no millage increase.
The request for the alternative budget was focused on the expenditures, not the revenues.
I don't think we've had.
Well, I
we've had an
understand
increase
that.
in years, we had asked for an increase
No.
in quite a few years.
2017, 18, 16?
Yeah, related to fireworks operation.
I think what we're dealing with is just the political climate. We can ask for everything we want, and I support all these capital improvements and things. I support spending money when we have to. I just don't think the political climate with council at the moment is going to be acceptable. They're going to give us trouble. They're going to make political trouble for us. They're going to make public trouble, and they're not going to approve of a 13% increase.
What, I hear that. What are they willing to approve?
They haven't given me any. They haven't given me any baseline fees. Like, this is what we're willing to accept. But they've just told me that we've got to be.
Inflation is 2.95%.
Yeah, it was like 20% last year.
Inflation,
Yeah. Last year.
it's inflation for those was not 20%.
The cumulative inflation last year?
CPI last year was not, I can look up what it was, but it wasn't 20%. CPI this year is 2.95%.
I understand that, but I think values are driven by property values, which go up as a result of many things, but one of which is inflation. I mean, that's the beauty and the brilliance of how funding county budgets is designed. Lots of people hate property taxes, I get that, because they view it as renting their property from the government and all that. And that's a different discussion, but property taxes naturally inflate over time if real estate values inflate, which is why you don't have to ask, if you live responsibly, you don't have to ask for tax increases, because your budget naturally goes up over time in line with one of the largest contributors to inflation, which is property values. I mean, property costs, whether it's purchasing or renting, is like one of the largest components of CPI. So I think what I'm getting at is I think I just want to understand, like, James, I get what you're saying. I mean, you're right, obviously, like the political environment right now is just cut stuff. Which, look, governments can be wasteful. So I'm certainly not opposed. I want us to be wise. I am concerned that we're just kicking the proverbial can, which is, you know, I think in a world where we can point at things and say, this is wasteful spending, like we're, you know, doing things that are wasteful, all for cutting that. I don't understand what our plan is for a lot of these longer term capital improvements, because then they just pile up and pile up and pile up, you know. Or is there a way for us to pay for this stuff out of the capital budget? Or, I don't know, I'm just trying to think out loud to say, hey, I definitely don't think we should have a tax increase, but I don't want to leave like the library system 5 years down the road with a pile of projects, and then all of a sudden it's like, you know, we can't.
We're in on the discussion with one of the things we talked about was some of these things that were very large expenditures that, for instance, this meeting, we're going to approve this at the meeting. So rather than have that as a budget item out of operating expense, it's thought that what we would do is have that as a capital.
That's what I'm asking. Can we do that as like a special request? I don't even know if that's possible, but can we package those together as like a special request? And
Yeah, when the time comes, we can do it like that, and behind that, we're gonna move some of our fund balance from the operating side to the.
stash it away. I think that makes sense. That's what I'm getting at, because I understand the political realities. I'm just trying to figure out how do we solve for, not like things pile up and then we look like we don't have a plan.
That was the discussion at the last meeting, was how do we pay for the things we need to pay for, that we need, without putting it into the operating budget. Yeah, like one-time expenses, yeah, we don't need to budget for $500,000 every year for a room. So that was the onus, and that's why we went back and had this discussion.
Got it. So would we do that as like a special, how do we do that? Like that, do we go like later and ask, or is that like a one-time? Does anybody know how we do that?
I think the idea was that we would come before the full board with requests for
Some capital expense.
for instance, the improvement here in the capital expense.
But do we have to, I guess what I'm asking is, if we do that, say the board votes for it, maybe they don't, I don't know, but let's say they do we then have to get that approved by council to spend that out of the capital budget?
No,
Okay. Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
I'm not opposed to using the capital fund, the budget, take some of those big items out.
No, I think that makes sense to how we solve this problem. That's why I was asking that question.
Yeah, I think that is the way to.
Yeah, that way we can like meet the kind of political moment where it is. I mean, it looks like you guys have done a great job, like trying to protect as much of the compensation adjustment by cutting some of the other items, which I think makes sense given some of the realities of the world we live in, so.
There was some discussion too that what the budget on operating side is, there are some
alternate proposed operating budget.
So can you do it now?
I'm moving to adopt the proposed alternate draft budget.
You doing that as a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
There's a motion on the floor to accept the alternate budget. Can I get a second?
Can I make one comment? We have in this budget, $105,000 for the AV equipment for this room. If we're going to look at doing it as a capital item down the road, we're better off removing the 105 from this budget and doing, because we're getting a better price if we don't piecemeal this, and this is piecemealing it. And if we take that 105 out and plan to do this from capital, then at the 455 for all the upgrades, then we can do it out of the capital fund, and we'll get a better price on that. Is that right, Jerry?
Are there any other items like that? I'm just scrolling through, but,
I don't think there's anything else that would be
okay.
considered eligible or considered capital.
Does that mean you have to amend your motion?
My motion has not been seconded.
That or we have to vote.
It hasn't been seconded yet, so I
That's right,
think,
it's still sitting there. Can you make another motion to accept it with those additions?
I would move to accept the alternate proposed operating budget, removing the 105,000 capital expense.
All right.
While
That's
withdrawing
becoming a
the
thing.
You heard the motion.
You're definitely breaking Robert's rules right now. I'm just not sure how.
Okay, is there a second? The moving properly second, that we accept the new proposed budget with the additions. Are you ready for the question?
I have some amendments.
You want to amend it to it?
I do.
All right.
Okay, it's really long, Jill, I wrote it out for you. I have handouts. I would make a motion to
Vote on this one.
allow a 3% inflation adjustment to all current salaries not based on the midpoint, and to allow for a 2-year phase in implementation of the wage study, but I would like the adjustments of the wage study to be a separate vote of the full board after everyone has had time to analyze the wage study. I would like to remove the $407,500 of capital expenses as identified by Bev, by reducing those lines: facilities $157,500, supplies $200,000, professional services $20,000, and capital outlay $30,000. Those are included in this budget, and I would like to make those something we pay for out of the capital improvement fund. That would reduce the contingency expense to the 2%, reduce library materials to the state library guideline of 15%, and then I would like to reduce our current property tax revenues by a 0.5 reduction in library millage from 6.8 to 6.3.
Oh, that's a lot. And to amend to the original motion.
Well, that's, the last piece about the reduction in millage rate, that's a totally separate thing, and it's.
Well, the millage is mentioned in our budget.
Well, I will second the motion so we can have a discussion on it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to accept the amended motion by Elizabeth. Are we ready for discussion? Question?
For the,
Or third now?
Can you go through that
Yeah, I can
list
do it.
again, please, more slowly?
I didn't realize the contingency was 2% of the.
I'm sorry.
I'll show you, I'm sorry.
The contingency is based on revenues, so that's not
Yeah.
gonna change. The contingency is
It
based
will
on
reduce the
revenues.
millage.
Correct, but it doesn't have anything to do with expenses. And it ultimately is based on the value of the mill, so it's,
If we reduce the millage, it will reduce our contingency. So you're saying I said it out of order, and you're correct, but my motion included both reduce the millage and then reduce the contingency to reflect the reduction.
got it, yeah, no, what I'm saying is the contingency is not, it's a mandated percent, so like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to make a budget to do it.
Oh, you're saying is, oh, it would, reducing the millage would reduce the contingency regardless?
Yes.
Okay.
If revenues go down, the contingency goes down automatically. That's what I'm,
It's, yeah, it's 2% of the operating.
We can make it higher, you're saying?
I think we could make it
I mean, I
higher.
guess we could, but right now it's at a set percentage.
Okay, as long as it's understood that reducing the revenues would reduce the contingency, that's fine.
So you're gonna take out the part about reducing the millage?
No, the
You'll leave that as
contingency,
reducing the millage.
I'm leaving that in there. I'm taking out the part about reducing the contingency, because Joe's saying that they're tied together in our budget, so reducing the revenues would reduce the contingency.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, I do.
Just thinking out loud, it may make more sense to have a motion. Yeah, I'm waiting to think about it. It may make more sense to address the village reduction, by itself, and then we would have to, then the change to the budget. Because if those changes would flow through the village budget.
The thing is, we can't reduce the millage, only county council can. And it,
We're requesting a
To request that, and then the next one would be to formulate the budget based on the expected.
Well, in the ordinance, they're approving the budget and the millage.
no, they approve the millage, they do not approve our budget. We have to present a budget to show how we would use the millage rate that they approve for us. And they want to know how we would move it. We would use it, our income based on the millage rate that we're, we propose a budget based on our current millage rate. And then, but they don't approve our budget, they approve the millage rate.
So this is the wording from the budget ordinance they approved last year. It says, budget approval and tax levy. Greenville County Council hereby adopts the Greenville County Library System Board of Trustees budget request. So it says that they are approving the budget, and then it goes on to establish the levy of ad valorem taxes. I understand they don't actually touch the budget lines, but the ordinance specifically mentions the budget.
Okay.
It says that,
Sorry.
oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, my understanding has always been that we present the budget so they can see how the millage is, we're planning to expend the millage that they approve, but they've never acted on our budget per se.
But it sounds like they have the authority to do so, or that they are adopting the budget request.
They've adopted it, that what you guys have presented or approved.
I can back out my amendment and try again if that seems to be the, you want the millage reduction amendment separate?
It would be better.
I'd feel better if it was, we could put it on the agenda for the full board meeting
A separate item?
as a separate
Okay.
item.
All right.
The millage rate is technically, because we have a fund balance to make the current budget, so if a reduction is proposed and approved, then we would still have a budget that could be the same, I think.
Okay, then I withdraw my amendment. I make a new amendment. Well, I'm just gonna, we'll save that for later.
I'm not in favor of reducing the millage because we hadn't asked for an increase in 3 years. And I think we're doing fairly well as much as
It's been a lot more than 3 years. Probably been like 8. It's been a lot longer than 3 years.
pre-COVID.
If we can,
Make the motion and just request that I make it. You're just asking, I'm still gonna make the motion in this meeting. You're just asking me to do it
bring it
separate.
up to the full board.
Well, I'd like to pass it out in committee. Right.
We're gonna finish James' motion first,
Okay,
and then we come back to yours.
all right, then I'll make my amendment again. I'd like the, salaries,
Hold it. I said we're gonna finish James first. So then you
She's
could-
amended, James.
Okay, all right, okay, go ahead.
She's withdrawing her original motion.
withdrew my original motion, I'm making a separate motion. Starts the same. That we would do a 3% inflation adjustment to current salaries based on actual, not the midpoint, and allow for a 2-year phase in implementation of the wage study. Salary adjustments based on the implementation of the wage study are subject to full board approval at a later date after the board has had sufficient time to analyze wage study documentation. So we would designate the funds in this budget, but passing the budget does not approve the implementation of the wage study. And then remove the $407,500 of capital expenses as identified by Bev in the alternative budget that we're discussing to be paid for out of the capital fund balance.
We go back to the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're reading the whole, I'm sorry, you're reading the whole motion. As long as we have time to discuss each one of these, I just have some questions.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
And then reduce the, well, that's all, actually, that's all. Those are the two.
You thought about this a lot, hadn't you?
I have not gotten a lot of sleep, no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, it'd be great if we could find out about this like more than 5 minutes before we're gonna vote on it.
You know, that's fair, Joe. I sent it to Ken and Stephanie and James because you weren't at the last meeting.
Yeah, I'm still part of the committee
Yeah,
there,
I understand.
so.
I think it wasn't like I just disappeared, you know, I was traveling, which was communicated.
All right, we've heard the motion restated. Can I get a second on that?
I'll second it for discussion.
The restated motion second, any question?
That has.
Would you, does the first part of your amendments, is this 3% inflation adjustment in addition to the 4.5 UCI or instead of?
Instead of,
It doesn't say that right now. I mean, for clarification purposes, I need to know if the 3% inflation you're suggesting a 3% inflation adjustment goes to instead of?
yes,
Or
instead of the
include-
4.5 ECI.
Any more questions?
Okay,
What is to allow for a 2-year phase in implementation of the wage study, that would not, I guess by definition, if we're only going to allow 3% for this year, then the phase-in wouldn't happen until next year's budget.
Well, I reduced the total, but I guess Tom, let me ask you a question about that, because the budget you gave us, was that a full implementation? But you were able to reduce it by $400,000 just by doing it after the ECI?
That was implementing the wage study adjustments and moving everybody to what the wage study said it should be done after applying the ECI. Does the 235,000 on full-time and the 55,000 on part-time would get people to where they should be based on that wage study.
So doing it after ECI dropped the total by 400,000? Wow. Well, then we wouldn't have to do the 2-year phase-in, because if it only costs my math was based on the full amount. They originally gave us the 600,000.
The other thing just a point to put it on the table is, this is not adhering to the comp plan that's been approved. I mean, the comp plan calls for the ECI to be the metric that we use, and so there'll be a difference there. And the other thing is, as we brought up at the last meeting, we are looking at a potential recommendation to the committee in this coming year about adding the ECI, or if we're getting away from that, whatever metric we use, to the starting minimums, Right now, we do it every 3 years. I pointed out last time, the county does that every year, so if the counties, I think you said it, their adjustment had basically been 3% over the last, whatever.
The last 2 years was 3%, the 4 years before that was 2.5.
And so that 3% gets added to the starting minimums every year. We've been looking at doing that we right now are doing it every 3 years, but that's part of what's causing us to fall behind. That's part of what's causing us to not get enough applicants for the jobs and having to re-advertise. And this is just gonna exacerbate that problem.
People don't wanna take jobs for the same thing they were making 3 years ago?
Do what?
I said, you mean people don't wanna take jobs for the same amount they were getting paid 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my question is like, what's the, like, before we get into the nitty gritty, like, what's the proper role here? I mean, my kind of view is, you know, you guys asked the administration to come back with a budget that reflected a 4.5% increase, right? Which I understand. They did that, and found a solution to, you know, really deal with capital items out of the capital fund, which has funding, and still, you know, provide for, you know, significant compensation adjustments. They are significant. Part of the reason they're significant is because we're behind. And like, if you're behind Greenville County in compensation, you are behind. Like, the county is not known for being like, you know, overpaying. So I think even by a very conservative standard, we were behind in terms of comp. So they did all of that. Why are you choosing 3%? Like, that just seems like you picked a number that, for whatever reason, and you're dictating to the administrative team, like, it just feels like a lot of like over controlling rather than saying, hey, you get 4.5%, spend it the best way you think you should, rather than us saying, hey, you get a 3% wage increase just because we chose 3%, and we're gonna maybe phase in a wage study over 2 years if it gets voted on, when there's no timeline, procedure, commitment. I mean, we also can't commit to that because there's no future funding for it if it's not in the budget. So that's a whole nother deal. Like, we can't, it just creates a whole nother can of worms. Like, I guess I'm struggling to understand why, you know, why you think the board should dictate it should only be a 3% adjustment versus 4.5 versus whatever.
What's the question?
Yeah, why should the board do that, and why did you pick 3%?
I believe the board is authorized to vote on the amount that the staff increase goes up, and I chose 3% for an inflation increase, based on the 2.95.
Okay, did you go back and look at like historical increases compared to inflation?
I did.
Okay, so you think the library is fairly compensating employees based on market rate for their services?
I think that the library salaries are behind, which is why I want to designate funds for the implementation of the wage study. The reason I'm delaying it for full board approval is because we got so little time, such little notification about it. I want to make sure that it's not just coming out of our budget recommended by the finance committee. I want to make sure every time when on the board has time to see the wage study.
Well, I mean, they've had more time than anybody else just as much time as everybody else. The wage study was done, when was it done? A long time ago.
It was done 2 years ago, but I first seen the information when I met with them a week ago.
I contacted every board member and offered them the opportunity to come and walk through it with.
Has anybody done that?
And I haven't heard back from a couple of people because they were not available or whatever, but either people, I left a message for you.
Probably me.
For you.
Yes.
And another person's out of town, another person hasn't called back. Otherwise, people, either we talked about it over the phone, or they said they were fine with it, they didn't need any further information, or else they met with us.
So we don't have anybody who's waiting to, other than people who have not done their part. We don't have anybody that said, I want to talk about it, but I have not had time to talk about it yet.
Yeah, and I don't think Alan has had time to,
I think it's on the finance committee,
pardon me?
on the finance committee.
I tried to reach all the board members.
Okay.
Yeah. I contacted.
Do you have a change to my voting agenda that you want to make?
No, I'm trying to
I'm thinking
understand.
the amendment is not in all this conversation.
No, it's still out there. I'm just trying to understand. I'm not opposed, like, I think it's important. I want to understand. I'm struggling a little bit with why we would cap compensation agreement or increases. Obviously, they got to be capped at some point. But why we would limit them to numbers that, to me, strike me as kind of arbitrary in what we've picked.
I did
When
include
we-
a letter from the Department of Revenue and Fiscal Affairs in your packet that says if the CPI is 2.95, that makes it feel less arbitrary.
No, but it's, you're like anchoring on CPI, but you're not addressing the fact that comp is already behind. So you're doing 3% on a base that is less, that's already below market, right? So when you're tying it to, like, I totally think a 3% CPI adjustment is reasonable if your salaries are at market rate, but they're not. So you're doing 3% off of a base that's already too low, so now you're punishing people twice. Because the base is too low, and you're not allowing for the wage study to increase the bases, and you're limiting it to 3%, which makes it a less real dollars in their pocket. So I don't think it makes sense. Like, if we couldn't afford it, didn't have the money, et cetera, all those things, I think that makes sense. But I think when we're limiting our budget to 4.5% increase, and that puts us in a scenario where, I don't even know what the rest of this stuff is, but this talks about, hold on, I'm not done yet. This talks about returning $5 million to the county. I don't think it makes sense to say, we can't afford to pay you another % plus a wage study. It just doesn't make sense.
Stephanie had a comment.
I was just gonna say that I don't think Elizabeth is saying that the staff doesn't deserve more. I think it's just a matter of understanding what the board is approving. And what you need to do, I really haven't had a whole lot of time to like look over all of this information. I've had conversations with them, and I've been looking at all the spreadsheets that are coming through. I don't think anybody's saying no, and we're just saying, give us a little bit more time to kind of like see what we are looking to. Typically, raises and wage adjustments are not done at the same time. It's like one cycle is an increase, one cycle is a wage adjustment, and typically it's not both at the same time because it does increase your budget. We are running a budget surplus, from what I understand, year over year to the tune of $26 million in capital expenditure funds. And what we're trying to do is be responsible with that money, say, hey, we have improvement projects, let's take out of that surplus that we're getting, and maybe we don't need as much because we're consistently running surplus. And if we've had a surplus and we haven't allocated it to the staff, well then we can't go back, maintain it in the past. We're going to take a step forward and make the corrections now going forward, but doing it in an awful way. I hope that makes sense.
I mean, I think, I do think at the end of the day, like, your vote is what you support or not. So like, if you vote not to increase compensation, you can't say, hey, I support library staff members getting comp increases, and then vote against the comp increases. I mean, you can do that, but like, your vote is your speech, right? So if you vote against the comp increases, then you're against the comp increases. So I think the wage study, I mean, Look, I think if, you know, somebody wants to go nitpick that and is gonna try to actually go, you know, that's getting into like, okay, are we gonna dispute that those numbers aren't real? I do think when we look at the county as a benchmark, I understand the concern of, well, what if the wage study is bogus? And that's certainly possible. But then if we're using the county as a benchmark and we're behind the county, I think that's a pretty good like litmus test to say, oh yeah, we can probably feel like 98% confident that we're definitely behind. So I don't know like what waiting on comp, I mean, is what everybody cares about, right? So I think waiting till some future date to say we might vote on this comp increase, and the problem is we vote on a comp increase, now we gotta come back to the finance committee, we gotta amend the budget because there's no funds allocated for that. Like, we can't just hold money, like, in the budget, kind of, you know, we either gotta approve the budget for the comp increase or not. And then if we don't approve it, those dollars come out. And if they come out, then we gotta come back later and we gotta amend the budget and put them back in, right? So now we got, just from a political perspective, we got a whole nother, right? You guys are talking about wanting the political environment resistant to spending. Now we got a whole nother issue, because it's like, now we gotta explain why we are quote unquote increasing the budget after we already approved it and spending even more money.
No, I am sorry, my amendment isn't clear. I am talking about designating funds for the implementation of the wage increase. But I appreciate Stephanie clarifying that. I'm saying that I want it pulled, the approval of it to be separate from the budget. That the implementation of it is still subject to a separate board vote. We can do that at our next meeting if the chair is willing to add it to the agenda. But I am asking that our budget approval not automatically approve the implementation of the wage study, even though we'll designate funds for the implementation.
I have a little different take than you do. I mean, you're right that you vote one way, that's your speech. Well, I look at this and, okay, so we have this wage study out there and everybody wants to adjust our wages. They gotta go up, we agree, they gotta go up. You adjust everybody's wages up, that's a raise. Now they've got the raise. Now you take their higher wage and you just automatically buy another 4.5% raise. You just raised upon, you know, you just keep. To me, double raises is not necessarily the way to go. Let's adjust the salaries, but I'm not gonna adjust them, and then on top of that, give another 4.5% raise.
I don't think that's how it works. Is it?
That's how it works, exactly how it works.
Well,
That is how it
initially
works.
that was what we proposed, and then going back to the alternate, we flipped it.
Correct, that's what I'm
And
saying,
so
like the alternative budget,
the
that is
alternate-
not what was proposed.
The alternate budget that
4.5% raise,
we
and
have,
then we increase their salaries.
the alternate budget that you have to consider along with the original one, we flipped it so that it applied the ECI. And then the wage, and then the wage study or part of the wage study results. And the approval of the wage study was already done when you adopted, a previous library board adopted the compensation plan. And if we may need to bring a different meeting, a different everything, but, anyway.
Right, so you understand, like, what she's saying is that what you said is not what happens. Like, that is definitively not what this is.
Well, they're definitively getting a raise, and then you're adjusting their salaries on like any amount, whatever you wanna call it, whether it's 3 cents or $3, you're raising them by 4.5%, and then tacking on another adjustment on top of that.
Because
How is
they
that
are,
not?
because they are being underpaid
It doesn't matter.
based on a third-party study.
You're still giving them 2 essential raises.
Yeah, you've also been underpaying them for multiple years.
So let's one or the other, let's give them a raise, let's give them a raise, 100%, I agree.
You're talking about compounding interest one's compounded on the other, and you're saying that they need to be stacked because they're.
I think you get to the same spot, yeah, like we can make it one adjustment if that is more palatable, we'll call it one adjustment, right? Like,
I think tell me what you're saying, what you're saying is, you can't do a raise that takes into account the raise that you just gave, so that you're giving a percentage of the increased amount as the increase the second time around. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
that's correct, but that's what Don explained in the beginning, that we're not doing that because we're implementing the percentage off the base first, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
The wage study said that salaries really across the board should be increased about 800,000 or whatever it was. That's what we had in the original budget. Apart from the ECI, we're that far behind based on the other libraries, our peers, and the county. So the wage study, outside wage study said these adjustments to not even get to where they should be, to get to closer to where they should be, was about 800,000 between full-time and part-time. So the point I was making earlier is, we didn't do that, we're just bringing it now into this budget. But we're still not getting all the way there from a salary outside study that said a year and a half ago, this is how much we're underpaid, the staff is underpaid. That's why those adjustments need to be made. We do the base pay increase, or we were doing the base pay increase, now we've been doing the ECI as our annual pay adjustment, like I think pretty much, for the most part, everybody in the country gets. But it's, I know to varying degrees. But the other thing I pointed out at the last meeting was when we adopted the ECI. We adopted the ECI because the county couldn't get us their base pay adjustment each year in time, by the time we had to present you guys a budget. So we had to have a metric. The outside consultant, this wasn't something we developed in-house, the outside consultant is the one who said, use the ECI. That's what a lot of government agencies use, because it's a table just for state and local government workers, which is what we did. We've been on it, this will be the 6th year. The first 3 years, the average increase was 2.33%. So it was 2.5, 1.8, 2.7. Now these last 3 years, previous 2 plus this upcoming one, which is 4.5, have been more significant, 4.7, 4.7, 4.5, because of the effects of inflation, which I think you mentioned, Joe, at whenever you guys had all.
We had this fight last year because we paid the inflation, what did we call it, bonus?
Yeah, you did the bonus.
I forgot, I don't know if we're allowed to call it bonus.
2 years, it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah, we paid the inflation adjustment, but we talked about how, there was a big dispute because some people wanted to make that, permanent, and, I was actually one of the people that said, don't make it permanent, because the ECI in the next 2 years is going to be high, because this is how the ECI works. I'm a math nerd. So I do think it's playing out, based on this, but the ECI works on a lag, right? So it's always gonna delay inflation, which I get the perception of that is, oh my word, inflation is cooling off, if we can use that phrase. It's sensitive, it all depends on your perception of whatever it is, 4%. But it's definitely lower than whatever it was, 8, 10, 12%, when it was just out of control. But we're just now seeing that, well, last 2 years, we've seen the effects of that flow through the ECI because it works on a lag. And I guess some people may look at that and say, oh my word, we're getting these big comp increases when inflation's dropping.
But even after we do the rate increase, will we still be behind with other libraries? We're still gonna be behind?
We will have adjusted people to what the wage study said they should have been adjusted to a year and a half ago. So, yes, they will have gotten to where they should have been a year and a half ago. Now, there have been the raises we have, that the generosity of the ECI, because it is a lagging indicator, has enabled us to get there. But, yes, they will have been adjusted to what the wage study said they should have been adjusted to.
So like if you adjust them, let's just put numbers on it, I think it's easier to think about. Let's say somebody's salary is, I know this is not normal, but it makes the math easy. Let's just say it's $100,000, right? And the wage study says they should be at 110, right? But then we say, oh, but you got moved to 110, congratulations, exciting. But we're not gonna give you that annual increase component, like the 4.5%, right? So a little over $4,500, like $490, $45.90 or so, which would bump them up then to like, if you round, close to 115, right? But if you just do the wage study and then say, yeah, but you're not getting the 4.5%, you just started the cycle again, right? So then in 3 years, you're gonna do another wage study and it's gonna be like, oh, surprise, they're behind because we lopped off 4.5%. The wage study is gonna, you know, the ECI is already telling us, like ECI is tied to inflation, right? And it's tied to actual results. So when we get a wage study, it's gonna be in line with the ECI. But you miss the 4.5%, and then the base is lower. So then the next 2 years, even if you do get the annual comp adjustment piece, it's going to be smaller than it should have been. So you got this compounding effect of falling behind, which is exactly what has been happening that we're trying to fix. So I guess like that's kind of my point about choosing one or the other. Is if you choose one or the other, you keep people behind where they already should be from a market-based perspective, and start the cycle all over again. So 2-3 years from now. And the other thing we haven't talked about is when we move away from the ECI, like salary compression and all that stuff is coming if it hasn't come already. That was the whole point of the ECI. One of the points of the ECI was, one, it's not arbitrary, and two, you don't have salary compression because it's adjusting every year.
Since we've gone on the ECI, we talked about this last time, since we've gone on the ECI, our compression adjustments have been, minuscule, almost non-existent. I'd say probably less than $1,000 over the entire time. It's been super low. So the ECI has worked for us to keep the salary compression at bay.
So I guess my compromise would be, let's leave the salary stuff alone, and I think the rest of this, like assuming the 407,000 is, can appropriately be categorized as capital expenses, and can be funded from that side of the piggy bank, then I think that makes total sense. If those are truly capital, let's pay for them out of capital.
I don't know that, I'm not sure if they are.
Oh, it's the list that you sent.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that it's that, you got to restate that.
Hold on,
Like
let's-
Joe's making it.
Yeah, no, well, I'm asking a question. I guess the question is, are we in agreement, that the 407,500, because and Elizabeth's got it listed by category here, but I don't know exactly what it is.
It's the list that she sent it to the whole board.
It's this one.
In James' motion, you were removing the 105,000 that's on that list.
Okay.
So that would come out,
That's where
that
that
would
one.
drop that number to 302.5. And the only other thing I'll point out is like the HVAC equipment, some of these items, we will definitely be coming to you for contingency funds, because as you know, from the facilities capital maintenance schedule, we show when an HVAC system gets 15 years old, we assume we're gonna replace it the following year. We don't replace it until it fails. So if you look at our capital schedule for HVAC on that first page, you got 37,500, 10 times there, because those systems could fail. They're that old, but we only replace them as they fail. But historically, we've generally only had to replace between 2 to 4 a year. So that's where that 150,000 of that list came from. 4 units if they fail at 37.5 apiece. So we will definitely, well, I shouldn't say definitely, but I haven't been here 1 year that we didn't have one system fail during the year. So we have replaced, this year we replaced 2. you had the budget to do 4, we have replaced 2. So I'm sure we will be coming for, I feel certain we would be coming for contingency funds if one fails at another branch in the upcoming year.
So what is the difference between, like, what is the rule for what we can pay for out of a capital expenditure? Obviously, like, building a building is a capital expenditure, but, like, I wouldn't normally think of an HVAC replacement, which is clearly a recurring item as a capital expenditure, but
You would not.
Well, supplies supplies and professional services, I don't think would be eligible unless the professional services were part of a building project.
I guess I'm asking, do we know, like, what is the test?
I know you're asking Bev and Don, but I did ask the county attorney for a copy of the ordinance that created that fund, and that's also in the packet I gave you. It says it can be used for maintenance.
That's it, just maintenance.
No, I think she's, like, clarifying that maintenance items are part, and that's what I'm asking, yeah. Right. 'Cause these are definitely maintenance.
No recurring services.
Is the consulting fee, is that falling under?
The one in the proposed budget is related to, creating specifications for the potential replacement of the generator for the main library.
So we can say that that's part of maintenance.
And that's one time.
Yeah, related to that, eventual purchase of that generator, which will be a capital asset.
That's right. That makes sense. So I guess my proposed amendment would be, amendment to the amendment,
Okay, let's say amendment to the amendment.
would be, that we leave the salary and wage adjustments as proposed in the alternate budget. But that we proceed with, moving the 407,500, I don't know that we're moving anywhere, that we remove that, with the expectation that that's gonna be part of a, capital, expenditure from the capital funds, and I guess, I'll probably follow up with that.
That's
Go ahead, vote on that.
that's item 2 in this
Yeah.
amendment that you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's do that, and then,
So other than, so tell me if you want to do this amendment, but you're gonna amend that salaries are gonna go on. But everything else we're gonna do.
yeah, sorry, that was really confusing.
Excuse me, before you do that, just point of order, because we've got a motion, we got an
Amendment, and then we got another amendment.
Yeah, so
Now, this is the first amendment here. You made the motion.
I made the original one.
You made the
She
motion.
amended it, he seconded her amendment.
I withdrew, I was gonna restate it.
What Joe is proposing would be an amendment to Elizabeth's amendment, and would she have to accept that or reject that before?
I mean, we can talk, I'm just like talking about it, and if we agree, it's probably just easier if we are in agreement to do that, let's just like vote on the one, and then we'll vote on the next one. And if we're not in agreement, then let's just vote on the one. Does that make sense? We're making this really
I don't see
complicated.
why she can't, amend,
well, I don't
add what
agree.
you just said in that amendment, do that one amendment.
I appreciate that, but I don't agree with his amendment, so
Oh,
I
you
can't
don't,
change
okay.
mine.
All right, so we do it one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can vote, we'll just vote on the first one, and if that passes.
And then go to her. And then after that, we go to James.
Correct.
Well, what would your amendment would be to leave the salaries, so that means the materials budget, which is a percentage of that, you're keeping that the same?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's driven per that would come down. I mean, if we, part of this too, is like if we do if there is a vote to reduce the millage, we gotta go back and redo this whole thing anyway. So, unless we're just gonna pay for it out of, current savings, which I don't know if that's the plan, but, I definitely, I think if that, we can
salary is the same, is that a 15% increase in materials, or does that turn out to be a 16 or 17?
We're barely at 15% now, because the revenues is, no, that would change the budget a little bit. Yeah, would change it a little bit. But we can back into that
I would like
calculation
to
and,
keep that at a hard 15%.
yeah,
We can back it up as much as we can.
back it up as much as we can to stay at the 15.
I guess we could, I don't know, do we have to have a number? I guess we could vote on that, right, James? So whatever, we vote on the 15% increase.
You make that as part of it.
I thought it was, I agree with Elizabeth's points here, that if you do too many things, when you change this line item's gonna change. The more you change, the more line items are gonna change along with it that are, we're not really thinking about it.
Let's go ahead
I will.
and, let's go ahead and do it, because if it fails, we go ahead and put it. We've had a lot of discussion on this. I think go ahead and do your amendment, if you can say.
We gotta vote on Elizabeth's vote.
Okay, all right. And did you get a second?
Yes.
Stephanie, I have a question on what you just handed out, the further meeting about the 5 million, that's a separate,
That's correct, that's separate.
that's not included in the.
No.
That's not part of your amendment.
That's not the,
Right, that's just.
the amendment that's on the floor, and you can correct me, is,
Is this?
3%, well, you know,
It's not the last
3%
thing which is
inflation
further moved, that
adjustment.
it's not included in her motion.
That's not your amendment.
The 3% inflation adjustment to current salaries, actual, and then, designating $364,022 for the implementation of the, salary adjustment, subject to full board approval. The removal of the capital expenses, I think Donna said it's $302,500 to be paid for out of the capital fund, and then to reduce the labor and material budget accordingly to 15%. I'm sorry.
Donna, do you understand what she's saying, with regard to the full implementation of the wage study, so we're through a later date? How do you know?
From what I understand, she's saying move the salary adjustment line to reflect a 3% adjustment instead of ECI at 4.5, do a 3% adjustment, and then have everybody, the board members, review the salary study, and then another recommendation will come, assuming this number or whatever comes out of.
Well, I think we're actually leaving the money in the budget.
I want to leave the money in the
We're
budget.
leaving the money in the budget, we're just delaying the vote to approve that exact adjustment.
That we're
The
designating
money
the
will be
funds.
designated in the budget as is. We're not taking any money out of the budget.
Okay.
We're just delaying
Yeah, no, I
the
didn't
approval
understand Yeah,
of
okay.
that.
Designating the funds for the implementation, subject to full board approval. The implementation.
Do you have a figure for that?
I do, 364,022.
264,
22.
So the effect of your motion then, or the,
It's a
the
contingency
math.
fund. It's just a contingency fund.
So the math is, do the salary adjustments, but they would be, at the numbers that you're proposing, the only difference in what we have here, what we have is instead of a 4.5% ECI adjustment, it would be a 3%.
and it's a not to exceed number, that 364 would be a not to exceed number
Right,
for the wage adjustments.
for this year, right? And we could increase it more next year if we have to.
And what is it that you want to approve?
Well, we just want time for people to look at stuff, and then in 2 weeks, we're just
So if we
saying.
don't exceed the number, then we've accomplished what you're after. Well,
Well, it gives you the opportunity to.
So when we make
It's not approved, it's a contingency fund, like, that's what essentially they're
Little
proposing.
C.
It is
our
set
target
contingency.
number is, Yeah, it would be helpful if we had a number to, because we have to base the budget off of that. We can't just pass a budget with a no number.
364.22. It's half of the original.
So it was,
$364,022.
so it would need to move from, in the budget, it means that expenditure's gotta move from
That's what we
the comp
want to
section to
include in
the
the-
contingency section. So the contingency number will have to go up by,
We can adjust the ones that are done by formula. It's just having a max, a target number that will help us determine how we use that money and be as close as we can to wage study recommendations.
Elizabeth, you said that 364,022 was half of what?
That's half of the number that we were given in the original budget for the need to implement the wage study.
You get that,
Of the 20.
1.5%, which is half free.
No. Not sure.
The original budget had 600 and something thousand for salary adjustments, just cutting that in half.
it's the 644, 344.
Originally asked for 644, 324 for full-time, 83,793 for part-time. It's half. That's why I said a potential 2-year implementation. So we could do the full implementation that you asked for.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
So, we ready?
Yes, I think so.
Is there anybody here to restate them?
We're not doing number 5 either.
We're not, no.
That will be a separate thing, so
Correct.
it's just 1, 2, 3, 4 is included in the motion.
Well, Joe said we don't need 3, so
Yeah, 3 is all right, so.
That's just driven, okay, so 1, 2, and 4?
yes.
And 4 is going to be, instead of that number, it's going to be 50%.
Correct. Okay, so what are we voting?
We're gonna go ahead and
As I worded
You just
it.
stated.
The one I stated.
What you just stated.
Okay, so 3%.
And then James second. Here we go again. For the question. On the amended motion by Elizabeth. Any more questions? More questions? All in favor, show of hands?
Don't forget it's
My
different.
answer is that.
All right, any opposers?
No.
All right, now we move to,
Do we have something else?
that gonna be the contingency fund?
Yeah, I mean, Joe is.
No, we'll have to come back to the budget based on the millage, we'll have to amend it again,
Okay,
depending on what.
So we don't have a budget to recommend to the full board?
yes.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay, Joe, what are you saying about if we reduce the millage, we'll have to vote to
The math won't work, right, so the revenue's gonna go down, so we just gotta plug the whole, we gotta change the plug number.
Okay.
But the millage is at the top.
Well, it's still, it is included in the ordinance.
Yeah,
the
we still have
approval.
to project millage and lower our projected rate. We're required to show that budget, so we just got, oh yeah, this 3 and 3 number. Well, it's like, it's weird, it's minus 393, but it's really a plus. That's gonna have to, we gotta fix that number. If we reduce the millage, right, so we reduce from 6.8 to 6.3, have a calculator, like,
It's 1.7 million. If we go down to half a mil, with the value of the mill we had today, so one is,
Oh, yeah, you got it,
3.7.
3.1 million.
I don't think that's on
So we're gonna refer any action on these,
I'm just saying, we gotta fix the budget.
that's gonna go to the full board and as well as the, yeah, but we've got to look at the further one.
So we will have a report for Monday.
Are you
On the
saying,
budget.
are you saying we could not make a motion to approve the budget? They could not make, this committee could not make a motion to approve the budget based on half a mil less, and however that flows through the.
Well, currently,
No, I'm saying, we definitely can do that, all I'm saying is we gotta update this, it only changes the one number, right, the 393, well, I guess there's a couple that are tied to revenue.
Right.
All I'm saying is at some point, we gotta adjust those
So,
before we,
Okay, so her point, she wants coming out of this committee,
For the budget.
a budget recommendation, and I think we can do that.
okay.
Even if we base it on half a mil less. But even though it's not put it out.
No, I'm not saying we can't, it was, I agree with you, I was just noting that we're gonna update that number.
We did agree on that.
No, we're good.
so are you voting on reducing the millage by 0.5, that you want us to prepare the budget based on millage? We don't know, it hasn't been reduced, but we're gonna prepare a budget as if. And that's,
I think
okay,
that's the best way to do it.
okay, then that could be a separate motion right now to direct us to amend the budget based on that.
happily make that motion once we deal with the original motion that's on the floor.
No, I think that's the only, everything's,
So we have one of my original motion, you can do, but
oh,
You
got first?
But you going to rescind that, your first motion?
I can't rescind it, because it's already been amended by Elizabeth Smith.
Oh, so you need to vote. We say it without you got. So we.
Well, my original motion was to approve the alternate 26.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
This budget minus the 105, she made the amendment, so now that's passed, and now that is.
All right.
So it needs to be amended again to take into account the.
Like, needs to be a separate motion to prepare a.
But like, we gotta come back and do all of this again if we're gonna, like, clearly y'all are gonna vote to support a millage reduction, so let's just vote on it right now and amend the budget and be done with this.
All right,
Like,
if it's.
I don't wanna come back, we all gotta come back for another meeting, because we gotta amend the budget if we reduce the millage, because then the budget doesn't balance.
If it's related to the budget, you can do it now, because it's driving the proposed
That's
budget.
my point, just vote on it.
Wait, James.
We gotta vote on it, well, unless she wants to amend it again, which we can.
I do not.
Okay,
Let's vote on the budget.
okay, James said, keeping the FY 26 with the 4%, 4%.
As amended.
By Elizabeth, okay, as amended by Elizabeth. Okay.
James tried to move to reduce the millage. Can he make an amendment on his own motion?
Well, I didn't try to,
He
I
can amend his own budget.
well, if you want me to do that right now, I
No,
will.
we're gonna do it as part of the
I
budget.
will move, I will amend the motion on the floor to include a 0.5%, or 0.5 millage reduction.
Second.
All of you heard that amended to the original motion? Any question? In favor?
Aye.
Are we voting on the millage reduction? I am in favor.
Vote again, please.
Yeah, that's you.
What did you say, Stephanie?
Okay. Now we need to go
Now,
to.
the motion on the floor is the original motion as amended twice.
Do you need us to amend the budget to designate, funds from the fund balance to make up for any deficiencies?
That really has nothing to do with the operating budget.
Okay.
All right, can I get that motion?
Hang on. Yes, you can, but I think we don't have to. I think if we are projecting revenues, so we've now amended it to, we're projecting 1.7 million in lower revenues. I think we need to amend the prior year fund balance usage number to be snafu, because right now, we have not approved. Do we have to approve that again, if that turns out to be
Every
deficit?
year, we show that we're gonna use a significant amount of our fund balance, but we haven't used it
I
because.
totally get it, but this is different, we're showing that we're not gonna use it, and we are. Does that make sense? Like, it's going the other way? Because right now, we're.
Way right now, the 393,000, we're adding money to our fund
Correct.
balance. If we drop the revenue
We're
by,
not gonna do that.
we're gonna use fund
Correct.
balance. It'll be just like we presented in the past.
All right, so we don't have to like approve that,
No, it
even
just
though it's
comes
different
out.
from the approved budget. Okay, cool. All good?
I was just gonna say, how long would it take you to run upstairs and run that with that lower amount? You know, flow through that spreadsheet, put it out, everybody can put it on that.
It'll take a little while changing the other stuff.
We could still present,
But we'll still be able to get one out.
huh?
We can still get one out.
Well,
for the
we can
full board.
still
Just like
present a
that,
budget
we
based
just have
on
it.
your actions in the finance committee. We can put that on the budget, on the agenda for the full board meeting on Monday, and then you can decide to act on it or not, if it
Yeah,
comes out the way.
let's just have that number for the board meeting, and then
We
we can.
can, we'll get the packet out to you hopefully as soon as we can, if not by today, first thing tomorrow, but,
Okay, can you give us some copies of that to us?
we'll send you the meeting packet for the full board meeting, and it'll be included in that,
Okay. Is that everything? We got,
we still need to, well,
we got to do.
is that all the actions related to the budget? I don't have any other changes, so now we have the contingency. Yes,
Okay. And we have a
I
credit.
haven't
No, we haven't adopted the budget.
adopted the budget.
I think it's what it's about.
the vote for the full budget will come, the vote for the budget will come at the full board meeting.
Yeah, we haven't recommended on this committee approval of this budget.
Well, and that's, we're gonna present the budget to the full board instead of bringing it to the committee again.
It was parachuted into an ADHD sport.
What did you say?
So we don't need to vote on it as a recommendation to get to the full board? Just go wait for
Traditionally,
What's the date of your motion?
traditionally, that was our motion to approve.
Well,
We gotta do something with what James left on the floor.
The original motion was to approve this,
And send to the full board.
then that was
And
okay.
then it's been amended,
So his motion's gotta be dealt with.
It was off the floor still.
We get a second on that?
it's already been seconded.
Second, all right.
Somebody's.
All in favor?
I,
Opposers?
All opposed.
One opposed. Okay.
Joe.
All right. Now, the second,
this is a new request for contingency funds. We need another, a while back, the board approved, designated funds for the opening day collection at the new Blue Ridge branch. We need to spend some of that, now, in the amount of $150,000 is what we're requesting at this point to draw on that designated fund.
Y'all,
For the opening day collection.
y'all comment a little further on that. You guys, as Bev said, you designated $415,000 of our fund balance. So we designated that money in the future to be spent on the Blue Ridge collection. When we presented the budget last for the FY25 budget, I should have included that $415,000 in materials to purchase an opening day collection. Totally my fault. Did not put any money, didn't put any 415 in there for that. We got an extra quarter this year from state aid, so we're allowed to spend that on materials, which is what we were doing. So that was like 131,000. The tech services needs an additional 150,000 out of this year's contingency funds in order to finish that purchase, in order to finish purchasing that collection to open Blue Ridge. So that's what that's for. We had designated 415. Now, when we present the new designated fund balance amounts to you in May or June before the end of our fiscal year, that 415 will be taken off because we will have purchased the whole collection for Blue Ridge. We had estimated that we'll look for 400. It's coming in around 300. So But we didn't have the money in the budget, in this budget year to purchase those things, so that's why we have to continue. What's that?
No, because it just wasn't in the budget. It just wasn't there.
Yeah,
Yeah, but we had in the earlier, we had 400 something set aside in the earlier budget.
not in the budget.
It was just in the
All that
fund
is-
balance.
So we just voted to designate the fund balance, and then it never made it out of the fund, the piggy bank. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's actually our controls are working. We're not spending money that we haven't approved.
See?
So your, consider to fund your questions $150,000.
Yes, please,
This is for the opening day collection at Blue Ridge.
correct.
All right, motion to approve.
Second. Okay, but this is probably something that will, okay, request of $150,000 change in fund. Question? None, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Stephanie? Thank you. All right. Any other actions for the finance committee? Wait, we have long enough.
I would like to move that we give $5 million of the general fund to Greenville County. Am I able to do that in this meeting?
We can't do that at this, at this meeting because it's not on the agenda, I'm sorry. But we can put it on the full board agenda.
We approve it for the full board.
It's okay. So we'll take the wording, I mean, well, you can present that, or I'll listen for new business. It's okay.
Any other items?